I've always had like this little pet theory. Don't tell my real parents, but that I'm not from here. That like if aliens landed today, I'd be like, oh, they're here to pick me up. They realized I wasn't in the back seat, and space is hard. They've been flying for 40 plus years, and they're like, oh, God, we go back and get them. That's what I would think, because that I really feel like I'm from another planet.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cosmic Chat. Today we have the delightful Keith Graeber, who is a comedian and a chef, but he's going to get down to some basic challenges he had even at 4 years old of being the kid weirdo and how to adapt to this world. So, how would you describe the taste of a banana to someone who's never eaten one?
Ooh, how would I describe the taste of a banana? Have they eaten other things? Are they like, I'm going with this scenario here. Are they like, have they tasted other foods so they know like a point of reference?
Yes.
Okay. So completely weird and unique and nothing like anything you've ever tasted. I don't even know why I prepped with that question, because there's no other fruit that tastes like it. So I would say it's sort of creamy. Maybe it's got a little bit of vanilla going on in there. And technically it's berry, so it's going to blow your mind. I'm actually a chef. So
berry.
Yeah, bananas are berries. Like tomatoes are fruits and all that kind of like, did you know kind of stuff. Yeah, bananas are technically a berry. And I would say it's also going to be way too filling to eat the whole thing. I can't ever eat a banana. It's like too much. It's like a whole, you know what I mean? It's like eating a potato or something. I just like it in stuff. Also, what I would say is the banana fresh is delicious. When it's processed and flavored into other foods, it's going to be completely disgusting and taste like medicine mixed with, I don't know, let's say some sort of perfume.
Banana medicine is so true.
Yeah. So I would stick with the real stuff, the fresh banana. Also, it's only fresh and ripe for about 45 minutes, and then it's going to go black. So don't put it in the fridge. Don't look at it funny.
But that's got nothing to do with how it tastes, though. Does it still taste good if it's black?
No, it tastes a little bit too sort of like too sweet, too like the sugars change.
They do.
They go from complex to simple, I think, is what happens when
this is the first time we've had a chef actually answer that question. So
oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so you got complex carbs and simple carbs, and the simple carbs are the sugars and the complex carbs are the, starches. And I think when a banana over ripens, it goes to simple carbs. So it's going to taste more like fructose and less like a starchy, potato or sweet potato or something like that.
Goodness me, here we have nutritional education with the banana psychology question.
I can't confirm that that's 100% true. I mean, I have like food facts flying at me like the bullets on Omaha Beach, and I just like try to absorb as many as possible. So
when did you have your first existential life crisis as a child?
My first one as a child, hold on, I have a list in my wallet.
Okay, good. It's good you carry it around with you just in case you forget.
No, I don't know. How do you know when you have one? How do you know
Great
that?
question. So we're referring to that first moment, or one that you still remember, right? Mm-hmm. Where one realizes, hey up, there's a bigger world out here, or you're not who you say you are.
That I'm not who I say.
No, not you. One realizes as a kid, adults or other people are actually not who they said they were, and right? The example is someone sees their teacher who they adore and seems very prim and proper out one night, partying.
I see.
That can be an existential crisis. But usually, often first memories are traumatizing.
Can I be honest? I think that
I don't know. Can you?
It's actually that's all I can do. I'm a bad actor. I'm a terrible actor. I need someone else to handle PR for me, because I will tell you if I'm annoyed or anything else. And I just like, it's all written on my face. No, I think that this possibly, okay, I know of one point where something like that happened, but that was later in I was like probably a teenager. But I think something like this may have happened before my memories, before accessible memories. So at a very young age, because I've always been very, very self-aware and very critical of my surroundings, of humanity and life itself. And I've always had like this little pet theory, don't tell my real parents, but that I'm not from here. That like, if aliens landed today, I'd be like, oh, they're here to pick me up. They realized I wasn't in the back seat, and space is hard. They've been flying for 40 plus years, and they're like, oh God, we go back and get them. That's what I would think, because that I really feel like I'm from another planet.
Now, do you feel that, what situation was there when you first had that feeling?
I just remember from early on, as far back as my memories go, that like, that's not how you're supposed to do it. That's not how you're supposed to do things. Like, I was, my parents, I'm like, you shouldn't be saying this to children. You shouldn't be, this is not what adults do.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay. So I remember one of my earliest memories, I think I was like, I must have been between 4 and 6. And I remember my great grandfather was a nice guy, really sweet guy. I liked him, but he was dying. He was in his, I want to say 80s, maybe 180. I don't know the age, but it was really old. And he was like, he looked like Lopan from Big Trouble in Little China. It was like, he was bad shape. And my parents were like, oh, you got to give him a kiss, and I threw a tantrum and I didn't want to give him a kiss because it was, it grossed me out. And also I'm like, I'm not your kiss boy. Like, what are you doing? And they sent me into my bedroom and like yelled at me and punished me for not kissing the guy. And I'm like, you can't do this. You can't force a kid to kiss somebody. I'm like, this is all wrong. Everybody's got it wrong. Everyone in the world, all you humans are screw ups, and you're not doing it right. And I'm doing it right, but I'm the only one who's thinking that. And so I guess I'm wrong by like a democratic vote, this is going through my head at age, whatever, 5, 6. And there were a lot of little examples like that. But I've always been a type of person that was like extremely self-aware, and pretty much to my detriment, because not many other people were and still aren't. People my age still aren't. They're still sort of.
What's a great example of not being self-aware over 30?
I would say I think it manifests into general ignorance, and tribalism, and bigotry, and just not being able to see the bigger picture of the world. I mean, if I can be 100% honest, I think it also manifests into types of religious, zeal, and I grew up in a very Catholic environment, and like a culturally Catholic, I would call it, and it ran the gamut between people who really thought like Jesus was going to cry tears if they didn't do something, if you didn't go to church on Sunday, to a cultural thing where like, oh, all my friends will not like me if my kid isn't baptized, which is more tribalism, so it's the superstition or tribalism. And I think those are some of the things that that's the manifestations of not being fully self-aware as a human, that you're an animal that exists on a planet, that exists in a solar system, that exists in a galaxy, that exist in this universe with many galaxies. And there's a lack of objectivity. There's a lack of understanding. And there's, I think, fear can sometimes rule people. And fear can be a block to, can sort of block the discovery and coming out of ignorance and educating yourself. I don't know. Was that too deep? Did I go too far, too fast?
No, fear is, primarily from the fight or flight response for the preservation of the species. But it gets knocked out because part of the preservation of a species is to be accepted by the community, right? Mm-hmm. If you are outcast from a tribe or a unit, then there's fend for yourself, mm-hmm. right? So your desire with what you saw was that there's something beyond needing to keep within this fear consciousness for survival. There's more than merely survival, correct?
Yeah. Oh, that's the concept that my role on this planet is to be born, consume food, and have offspring, and then die is the most depressing thought I can think of. You know what I mean? Like that you're just a piece of this, like, constantly repeating process, and you're not an entity unto yourself. And not realizing that you're an entity unto yourself outside of, going to work and buying groceries. Some people maybe think that that's fine if you're happy with that life. But what I'm saying is to understand that you're an entity within this entire existence. That's very important. And that can change a lot of the ways that you think about things and the ways that you accept other things, other people, other ideas. Yeah. I've never had an issue with that.
What would you say was the most challenging aspect of being self-aware as a teenager?
Just being an outcast. I've always considered myself, one of the things that I've read that I identified most with was, there was a novel it was like a short novella by, I think that's what they call it, I don't know, by Mark Twain, and it was called Pudd'nhead Wilson. And it was mostly in the beginning, it was about this character that they deemed Pudd'nhead Wilson, and he was just kind of doing some satire about small town America or country mentality. And so this sort of doctor, lawyerish guy moved to a small town, and I think it was Missouri. I think that's where all of his things are set. And he said, like, off the cuff remarks that were a little like clever, and he would study like fingerprints, and which in the mid 1800s was like pseudoscience, that was like, whoa. And everything that he thought and said out loud was so far over the townsfolk's heads that they thought he was the idiot. And so they called him Pudd'nhead. So you're democratically elected as a moron by people who actually are less intelligent. And I grew up in Philadelphia, which, there's great things about Philadelphia, but my environment was very much like, it was all tribalism and, very closed community. And like, if you were friends with this group, you dare not be friends with this other group. Like there was a war when I was a younger kid. Like it started to expand as you get older. But when I was a little kid, like all the kids on the street that I lived on couldn't play with the kids on the next street over, because those kids were the evil kids from the other street. And I was every time something like this would come up, I was always the guy that would say, why can't you why? I don't want to do that. That sounds stupid. That sounds like a lot of work. I don't feel that way. And I'm not loyal to you, some random fool that was born near me. I don't want to do this. I had the same reaction to religion and Catholicism in general. And I I feel like the bravest question anybody, or the bravest statement any human can make is just to say, I don't know. And a lot of people don't want to say that. They want to make something up. They want to force an issue. And that happens with religion. That happens with politics. People force a narrative and just, instead of saying, I don't know, I would love to find out, tell me the information. That's the smartest thing anybody can say is, I don't know. I want to know. And that was always my philosophy. And it wasn't deliberate. It was something it's just part of my nature.
So living in I don't know is a step of vulnerability, right? So to be vulnerable is often considered an area of weakness, but from more of a spiritual growth point of view, it's actually where enlightenment or creativity or possibility comes in, right? To acknowledge I actually don't know all of that is actually not being ignorant. It's the opposite. To pretend that one does know about it. That the training is to look up to someone who is supposed to know all things and be all things. And of course, then there is unrealistic expectations, as we're all human. How then have you managed to adapt in a world where you always felt that you were very self-aware, and because of it as an outcast, without being resentful to people and completely isolating yourself? I mean, you're happily married.
Yes.
Right. So you've obviously found a connection with another human being. So it's not as if you are a hermit far away. How did you manage that bridge? It's
not easy. And I can tell you, like personally, that I still feel like an outcast. I still, to this day, I'm very close to my wife. I love her, but I still feel like I'm, you know what I mean? Like it's a mixed marriage with me and a human. Honest to God, I feel it's the best mixed marriage, but I'm happy to do it. Like they're beautiful creatures. And this one especially is the best one I've met. But I'll tell you the truth. I don't talk to my family that often. I have friends, and I've had a few people that I would describe as my best friends. But I can always tell that the ceiling that's there on the relationship. And I have that ceiling with a lot of people and all people. And most of the time when I see human behavior, I roll my eyes and I'm like, how, it's so easy to do the other thing. Why are you doing this dumb thing? And I can't. And that's sort of always been a roadblock. So I don't know if I have completely overcome. I know that I think comedy helps. I think comedy helps me to sort of recycle all of that into something that's funny, and make fun of the fact that we don't get along. By we, I mean humans and I. That we don't see eye to eye, but it's whatever. We can agree to disagree and go about our lives and just do the best we can. That's sort of always been my, I wouldn't even call it it's not a conscious philosophy, but sort of like a default philosophy that I've adapted to.
It really is. That's taking a step back, right? Even in Catholicism, right? You have the rosary beads, and the extra one there is actually the witness, right? You're witnessing what's happening, and so the capacity to have a big picture actually means you have to pull back, right? To be pulled back and to be able to have a look at the situation. But when one is very much immersed into it with either value based on it or finances based on it, then one sucked back into the vortex, right? So to be able, if you've always had an awareness that this doesn't make sense, then that's usually the point of view which is needed if someone is to be writing or expressing their point of view. You may find people there who relate to it, who didn't before. How long did it take for you to really find people that you could relate to? Was it until if you went to university or you moved out of Philadelphia?
Here's the thing. I'm not really into astrology, but also I'm a total Gemini. and that duality is already represented. Like before I even pop my head in, I'm like, this is stupid, but wait, that makes a lot of sense. I am that, and I am a Gemini, and I've always been like able to sort of like be in different pockets and different groups and get along with different types of people for whatever our similarities were, whatever we had in common. And I would always be able to find some common ground with different people. So I would sort of like float between different groups. And sometimes, I would feel like, oh, I was never really enough of a jock to hang out with jocks, but I was kind of athletic. I was smart, but I wasn't the smartest kid. I wasn't the nerd. I wasn't and I liked comedy. I liked writing and whatever, but I was never really like enough to be a theater kid or enough to be an art kid or enough. I was always just some sort of like conduit for everything. And so I think that's been my nature. And so I've always found little pockets of people that I liked. And I think I mostly got along with a lot of the other outcasts in school. And
right, because one felt the same experience of being separated, right? And this is pretty much as one becomes more awakened, we wake up from the delusion that we are separate, right? The actions that you're talking about, how you would have a little relatability of these people, a little relatability of those, is actually more awakened, because no one person or one thing will actually match who you are, as you are who you are, right? And so this delusion of this one entity is going to fix you, or this is your pocket, this is what you do for the rest of your life, actually is very controlling. And control is juxtaposed to evolution, and that requires evolution intellectually, scientifically, spiritually, emotionally, right? So when we let go of those so-called archetypes and come more into who we are as a person, right, the ability to flow with other people, because everyone is complex. We are complex beings. Some people might find it bizarre that, I teach meditation, but I like hip hop music, and the radio stations I play are seemingly juxtaposed to what someone does who teaches meditation. But who says I can't do that? There's a lot of soul and a lot of story being told in a lot of songs, right? But so do you have a practice where you're able to center yourself? Like say you're going somewhere and it's a social event with your wife, and there's probably going to be a lot of people that you just know you are not going to jive with, but you're going there because you love her and you want to be there together. Do you do something regularly to help center yourself?
Well, one of the things is listening to music and writing. Like I'll just have a little session where I put on some music and write. And the music that works is the worst music in the world. It's so bad.
What is it like? Baby Shark. Da, 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 da.
I wish.
Is that what you listen to?
I don't know if you've ever heard of vaporwave.
I don't know.
But it's like 90s inspired. Imagine if some sort of a weird club DJ was playing like 90s inspired spa music. You know what I mean? Like it's so bad. But it's sort of, I don't know. It's intellectually stimulating because it's sort of like this current, and that's what I listen to when I write. That helps. I think my meditation process is because I never can like just sit and meditate. Like when, if somebody's like, oh, let's start a meditation. You do this, blah, 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 make this sound, whatever. I always feel uneasy and like, I still want to move around. I still got to do this, and it doesn't help. It just makes me feel like I'm being put in timeout. And, but meditation is about like really listening to yourself. So my process that I like to do is I like to garden alone. And what ends up happening is 1 billion thoughts go through my head, and I get to understand all the thoughts that are loaded in my brain currently.
Yes.
And then I get to process them. And, I don't even, sometimes I black out and don't even realize what I'm trimming. I'm like, oh, this was a tree? Well, now it's a shrub.
Yes. So the mind goes into this state. So I think this is a great point that you bring up with the idea of what meditation is. With what I teach, most of the time, I spend hours unraveling an idea, a cultural marriage of what meditation is, or a tribal thought of what meditation is. And pretty much it can be put into two camps. Concentration, which is trying to focus on breath or following someone's voice or doing some actions. This is where we see people sitting upright, so the spine is aligned. And many of those archetypes that did that, they never had a high chair to get into. So they sat on the floor very early on, and it's comfortable for them to sit like that. Not Westerners who are popped in a high chair. We're like, oh, our hips are hurting, right? So that's having the body to concentrate. And if we want to take the word meditation, it's actually from a Latin word. And those who had access to Latin and who wrote it down were monks, right? And so their idea was to sit quietly and concentrate on the word of Christ, right? And then you've got another form, which is non-directive. And that's where it goes with the charm of the mind. And you're talking about a very active mind. And I think it's very sad that we culturally live in a world where we are bringing up people, telling them you need to focus all the time, pay attention on one thing, do this. That's all right. But the mind actually travels and wanders. And that's where pure creativity is. So when you happen to be gardening, you're putting yourself in a space where you're allowing the charm of the mind to equally flow without judgment. And what happens is the mind starts to allow itself to process thoughts and emotions that are there, that haven't been processed. And you go into another state of consciousness where, I've got to come back. I don't know where I went to, right? It's really healthy. Children will often sort of zone out, like, and that's for the mind. It's actually integral, but we squelch that. With the practice that I fundamentally teach, which gives 2 to 5 times more deep rest physically, is a non-directive practice. It works with the charm of the mind. And that's a great question. What is the purpose of meditation? Is it listening to oneself? Is that when someone who has an awareness of what one self is that the higher self? Is that the small, selfish ego self, right? I would imagine that phrase coming from you would be more of a higher self, intelligence, expansive self, listening, right? I like to also call that the soul, right? Because there's something, as one gets older, one remembers situations of when one was 10 years old. It's still me. I remember when I was in that running race and I thought something and my knee went, right? I remember when that happened, but physically I look completely different. But I remember my consciousness because it's still me. So there is consciousness of who we are beyond that small term, right? And if we are talking about that, getting down to listening to that, we have to get all that clutter out of the way, right? But often if we just focus on doing that, all we're doing is focusing on getting the clutter out the way. We're not getting the clutter out the way. We're just thinking about getting the clutter out of the way. Which is a nice sort of exercise, right? But if we want to sort of get down deep to get that sort of deep rest, what that does is replenish the nervous system. And when the nervous system is replenished, and we do all kinds of things that don't replenish it at all in a society. I mean, people would often beg, I wish I could work at home. And guess what happened? We had to do that for a couple of years and it drove people mental. Mm-hmm. That was not the dream after all, right? So there's additional stress, there's the mind. How do we bring this down so the nervous system is in a place where fear does not possess oneself? If one has awareness, there is not being in bondage to that fear, right? Mm-hmm. And inside of you, it was very strong, even as a child, right? So if there are people who are curious about what is the meditation that I'm talking about, and I have a really busy mind and maybe I should find out, back here is a very bad lighting image of Vedic meditation stories. It's an ebook. Currently, if you have Amazon Prime, it's completely free. And any donations towards it go towards the nonprofit. And if you want to find out about the nonprofit, you can have a look down. It's to bring large groups of a meditation practice that's non-religious, helps the body get deep rest to those who can't really access it regularly, to go into communities where they don't have awareness of what it is, or not even the financial capacity to have a program that is more intensive than simply a concentration technique, which is fine, but some people need a little bit more juice to get to be able to hear our own, let's say, intuition. Right? Because when one is centered in one's own intuition, it actually doesn't matter what anyone else says. It doesn't matter if we don't fit in. It's simply being in that moment, and then magical things happen, right?
Yeah.
Great creative things occur. Now, if you were to go back to your 4 to, I think, 6-year-old self, where you were like, I'm not kissing him, would you say anything to your younger self now to help either navigate what you then went through, or say, I wouldn't change a thing? What would you do?
Oh, it's like the It Gets Better campaign for for being around humans that are weird. No, I would encourage myself. I would say, you're not wrong. Don't worry. There's just a lot of these people that are wrong. And maybe they're not exactly wrong, but they're weird. And you're Neo, and these people are still in the Matrix. You won't get that reference for another 30 years, kid, but it's fine. It's just that you just got to roll with it. And I think knowing that I wasn't wrong, and without having too much hubris about it, just knowing that, like, oh, it's okay, don't worry, you're not wrong. You just have to deal with these people, but don't allow it to make you criticize yourself internally and your identity. Your identity is not wrong. It's just, it's hard to make your identity adapt with everybody else. So you just got to roll with it, nod sometimes, yes them to death. They want you to go to Catholic school. You're going to have to like touch a bunch of weird stuff and say a bunch of chants. It's whenever you do something wrong, you're going to have to go into a dark closet and whisper it into some old guy's ear. Then he's going to give you some like verbal punishments to do. I don't get it either. It's fine. There's a lot of kneeling. I would have pads. Anyway, you're not wrong, but there's like this, all this is like work to do. You know how when you go to work or you go to school, you do homework, you go to work, you have to do stuff and you make money. Dealing with all these people is like the work in being a human, in human existence on Earth.
That's right. Really, the advice of merging the soul or spirit of who you are in the human physiology and in the time that you're here, meaning what is or what isn't acceptable in that time period, in the family that you're born into, right? The city that you're born into, because your experience would be very different if you grew up on a hippie compound in Topanga. Yeah.
Or if your family dynamic was different.
Yes.
You know, I was the oldest, and had I been the youngest, maybe I'd have a different, situation.
And in the Vedic worldview, it comes from that we actually orchestrated it all perfectly for us to sort out something for a better spiritual up-leveling. And I too very much was like, I'm the eldest. If I wasn't the eldest, if I wasn't the girl and eldest, if I wasn't in that town and eldest, there were all of these stories that were happening about that, blaming, because that's the natural state, until I surrendered it all. Don't take it so personally. And there was a lot that I gained from having that, and meditating regularly, getting rid of the stress. And people are who they are, and a lot of the ideas of having to be validated by other people, right, actually sells us short of who we are inside. We are all valuable. Well, I would thank Keith so much for being here today. If you enjoyed the lovely chat, please put it down in the comments. We'd greatly appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel, because it helps more awareness of the non-profit. I know that Keith is going to do that. I just know that for sure. And we'd like to thank you for joining us for this wonderfully, spiritually enlightening Cosmic Chat.